It's been a great reading month in October, and if you want to hear about the books I read in the month of October, stay tuned. Hey everybody, welcome to Book Talks with Miss Thomas. I'm Miss Thomas, and if you're new here and you like hearing about great books, welcome. And if you are returning, yay, thanks for coming back. This is my October wrap up. It's a little bit later than I would like, but and I keep apologizing, but I have been really busy with my job and with grad school, and just with life. Life happens. But anyway, I have some really good books to tell you about, and so let me get to the list. So the first book I finished in October, I actually started in September. So I mentioned it in one of my September videos, but I wanted to let you know I finished Local Woman Missing, and it was good. I enjoyed it. It was very good. A lot of people like that particular author. She does come highly recommended. And I read, I forget the first book that I read by her, but I read that book. I'll put it down here. And I enjoyed that as well. That was a few years ago. So, when I heard she had another book that people were recommending, I got it. I listened to the audiobook, and I highly recommend the audiobook because it had a male narrator and a female narrator. And both of those narrators were I want to say children, but the male narrator was more like 15. He was a teenager. And the female narrator was a little girl. And then between those two narrations, there's also some adults telling the story. And so if you like a lot of different narration, especially in an audiobook, I would recommend Local Woman Missing. Now, the premise of the story is that one woman disappears. She's a new mom. She's had a baby, and her husband is a cheat, and she's a cheat too. And she hands him the baby and says she's going to go out jogging at night, like 10 o'clock at night. And really, she's going for a rendezvous with some random guy, and she disappears. So that woman is missing. And then there's a parallel plot where this little girl was missing. And the little girl reappears many years later as a teenage girl. And so the family is thrilled to have her back. And sometimes we're hearing from her point of view. Sometimes we're hearing from her teenage brother's point of view. So I loved all the different narrations and the different perspectives in Local Woman Missing. So that's a good one that I think you would enjoy if you like a good mystery with some twists and turns. Nothing More to Tell by Karen McManus. I got from the library. I had it on hold for a while. I was excited to read it because, Karen McManus is my go-to for a good mystery, a young adult mystery. And I have to say I DNF'd this one. There was nothing wrong with it. There was nothing objectionable. That I didn't get that far into it, though. I just got bored. I didn't really invest in the characters. Now, like I say, I've got a lot going on right now. I'm really busy. So it's a little harder to grasp my attention. Sometimes a book can just hook me in, but lately I seem to have so many things going on. I'm a little harder to engage as a reader. So it might be me, but I DNF'd Nothing More to Tell by Karen McManus. It was the story of teenage kids who are in, I think it was I don't know if it was a prep school, if they were wealthy kids. I get the impression, I think they were. It was, almost a month ago and I didn't finish. But there was this beloved teacher who was missing. He was killed, I think. He was killed. And there's, I guess, some suspicion cast on on especially this one particular teenage boy who, is like the golden child of the high school. I don't know. I don't really remember much about it. I normally love Karen McManus, but that book, it didn't hold my interest. So I gave it back because there was a waiting list and I figured somebody must like it. And I might like it in other circumstances. I've just been so busy lately. A really good one, though, a wild ride, I would definitely recommend is called Counterfeit I definitely liked Counterfeit. And that was the story. It was about Asian Americans. And the one is Ava, and she's a mom, and she seems to have it all together. She's the successful lawyer. When her friend Winnie, her college friend Winnie, shows up, and Ava is feeling a little bit frumpy as a mom. She can't seem to get her kid, to be the perfect child. And I think she's wearing yoga pants or something, and she just feels like a frump when she runs into Winnie, and Winnie's got this designer bag and this gorgeous outfit, and Winnie breezes back into her life, and the two of them, they rejoin their friendship. They were friends in college, and then they lost touch, and they become friends again. And come to find out, Winnie has quite a racket going where she buys counterfeit purses, knockoff handbags that are really good knockoffs, and she returns them to the high-end store for a refund. And then let's see, I can't remember exactly how the little scheme goes. She somehow buys a bag from a designer. That's what it is. She buys a fancy designer bag, like a Birkin, a really fancy bag from a store. And then she gets the knockoff and returns the knockoff to the store and sells the designer one on eBay. And so she's got quite a successful business selling counterfeit bags. And she gets her friend Ava in on the action. And so that's an interesting book. And it's just a really fun book. And I like the way it challenged the perceptions and the bias against these two women who, go in and buy fancy bags, but they appear Asian. And so I like books that play with, our preconceived notions. And in this case, these women use those preconceived notions. They use it to their advantage in their business. So that was a fun book. Finlay Donovan Knocks 'Em Dead is the sequel in the series, the Finlay Donovan series. And I thought this one was just as fun as the first one. I think the first one's called Finlay Donovan is Killing It. And, Finlay Donovan is a writer who's mistaken for a killer. In Finlay Donovan is Killing It. And then by these mobster wives, they hire Finlay Donovan to kill their husbands. And she's really just an author. She doesn't want to go around killing anybody. And then in the sequel, Finlay Donovan Knocks 'Em Dead, her husband, who has abandoned her for another woman and tried to take custody of her children from her, there is somebody who's taken out a contract on his life, she finds out. And so she's concerned about sending her children off with her ex-husband because she's worried about the safety of her children. But she can't tell him, hey, someone has taken out a contract on your life, because that would, lead to some questions about, well, how would you know such a thing? Because she wants to be a good mother and have custody of her children. So it's just a fun book. And she and her nanny friend, Vero, they got into some antics in Finlay Donovan is Killing It. And so, of course, we have a return of Vero and the two of them. And if you read Finlay Donovan is Killing It, Vera was kind of like, let's get into this. Let's make some money. Let's go, cause some trouble. And Finlay is more of like the straight man in the comedy act. And that was a cute book. I enjoy both of those books, the Finlay Donovan series. They're really just a lot of fun. Things We Do in the Dark. That was one that I had mentioned in another video. My friend told me she wanted to read it, but there were some trigger warnings, and so she was reluctant to read it. And then she told me she read it. And so I listened to the audiobook, and it was a pretty good book. There was definitely some things going on in the book that were not very moral. It's certainly not a Philippians 4 book, but it was a good mystery, a psychological thriller as well. And Things We Do in the Dark is a story. It begins with Paris, who she wakes up with a straight razor in her hand, and her husband has bled out to death. He's been killed with the razor, and he's in the bathtub, and he's dead. And so she's arrested for the murder, but she did not commit the murder, and she can't remember what actually happened. And so there's Paris, and she's, being accused of her husband's murder. But then there's all these additional storylines that are woven into the book about Paris as a younger person. And there's also this storyline about Ruby, who was this really awful, abusive mother. And she was arrested for killing a boyfriend, I think, a boyfriend who was a married man. And then she's about to be released from prison for that murder, and she's referred to as the Ice Queen. And so Things We Do in the Dark is the name of a podcast, and the guy who runs the podcast is trying to interview Ruby, this Ice Queen who was arrested for murdering her lover because he was married to someone else. And then there's this parallel plot about Paris, who was wrongly accused of killing her husband. And so The Things We Do in the Dark is the story of two women who are apparently violent killers, and we just really get a deep dive into what their lives really were like. And, there are some things in the book. There's violence, there's sex abuse. It's not graphically depicted, but it's there. And I think there's some addiction. There's definitely some things in Things We Do in the Dark, but it was a good book. And it was an interesting psychological book, and it had a couple of really interesting mysteries to follow. Okay, Daisy Darker is a sort of a spin off of And Then There Were None by Agatha Christie. And in the book, one of the characters in the book, Daisy Darker, even says that they read And Then There Were None by Agatha Christie. So it definitely makes a nod toward that Agatha Christie book. Now, Daisy Darker is the story of Daisy Darker. That's the character's name. Her grandmother, Beatrice, and I wondered if Beatrice was supposed to be Beatrix Potter. I'm not sure, but her grandmother Beatrice makes these Daisy Darker books, and she becomes a very successful author. And Daisy Darker has a sister named Lily and a sister named Rose, and they get together at the grandmother's house, and there's a mystery there where the grandmother believes she's going to die at midnight. And so there's a lot of, hoopla about, what's going to happen to the grandmother. And then, of course, she does end up dead, and we wonder who killed her. And so there's all these different suspicions pointing to Lily and Rose, and Daisy is trying to figure out what happened. And it's very much a modern And Then There Were None by Agatha Christie. I enjoyed it. But, if you've read And Then There Were None, you can figure out Daisy Darker pretty quickly. And I like to figure out what happened when I'm reading. And, if you've read, and I've read And Then There Were None, there wasn't too terribly much to figure out. There were some surprises at the end, but they were surprises I've seen before. So I don't want to give anything away, but I would, if you enjoyed Agatha Christie, I would recommend Daisy Darker. And finally, The People We Meet on Vacation was the last book that I read in the month of October. And The People We Meet on Vacation was just a fluffy, light romance. It was about these two people that go on different vacations. The girl in the book is a travel writer, and she goes on these vacations, and she brings her friend, and it's like a male-female friendship with a little bit of romantic tension, and you just you wonder if they're going to get together or not. And they both, of course, have different relationships in the book too, and that was just a very light, fluffy romance. So The People We Meet on Vacation is a good choice if you're looking for a book that is just very light, easy read. So that's my reading month of October. I apologize that the video is a bit late in coming out, but I wanted to tell you my books that I've read, and I do recommend all of them. They were good books this month. I had a good reading month. So I hope you're out there too and you are enjoying some great books. Bye for now. I almost forgot to tell you, I also read The Extraordinary Deaths of Mrs. Kipp in the month of October. And the reason I did not mention it is because I'm doing a video later on books that were gifted to me by Kristin sisters. So I haven't decided what I'm going to call it, but I'm going to cover this in a later video where I talk about other books that were gifts from just godly friends in the BookTube community and just another friend who gave me a book as well. So stay tuned for that video. Bye-bye.